Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Wausau PD Podcast. And I want to take just a moment to introduce who I have here with me today. On my right is Amy Riegert, who is a sexual assault forensic nurse examiner with Aspirus. Jessica Lynn, who is the program coordinator of sexual assault victim services with the women's community here in Wausau. And to my left is Natalie Zabalski, an ADA with the Marathon County District Attorney's Office. So, welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Nice.
Before I give you the floor to tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about who you are and what you do, I just want to talk about the reason why we're here, and that is to introduce Seek, Then Speak, and discuss how it helps survivors, law enforcement, and support professionals within our community. So before we talk about that, let's just hear a little bit more about each one of you. So let's start with Amy. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am the SANE coordinator for the Aspirus Wausau Hospital, and I have some coordination efforts that I help with across 10 hospitals within the Aspirus system. And I have been in this role for, two-ish years, and I've been really enjoying it.
Now, I kind of gave it away when I introduced you to begin with, but SANE, what does SANE stand for, and what does that mean?
Sure. So SANE stands for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner. It also can be called FNE, and that's a Forensic Nurse Examiner. And so I think the majority of the industry is kind of going towards more a forensic nurse, as it's a little bit more encompassing of we do more than just sexual assault, where our topic today will focus on just sexual assault.
Yeah, and we'll probably unpack this as we go, but what is the purpose of a SANE?
Sure. So we're medical providers, registered nurses that have additional training to be able to care for people who have gone through some type of a trauma experience. We can help with their medical needs after this trauma event, and also have training on how to document things forensically, be able to collect evidence to help build towards their case should they choose the route to go to reporting. And then also be able to help provide those resources for them so that they can be on their better equipped for their healing journey.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe the primary purpose of a SANE is, correct me if I'm wrong, the survivor's well-being, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe a second is the forensic side of things, like helping the criminal justice process through gathering evidence and things like that. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that definitely is accurate. We wanted to make sure that their bodies are healthy and that they are taken care of, and forensics does come a little secondary.
Okay. And for a survivor of sexual assault who would get a SANE completed, where is that usually conducted?
In the emergency department, we offer those services, and we are rural in most of the areas, so we prefer that they connect with the emergency department to make sure that there's a SANE available, that they can meet them so that they're not waiting in that waiting room for, it's been pretty busy lately, 3 to 5 hours, that we can meet and connect and be able to see them right away for the services that they need.
Now, when I hear emergency room, I think of dollar signs. So for sexual assault survivors, will they be stuck with a bill based upon a SANE that's completed, or is that something that's taken care of elsewhere?
It is taken care of elsewhere. In the state of Wisconsin, there is a fund called the SAFE Fund, so Sexual Assault Forensic Exam Fund, that covers the cost of our forensic visit.
Okay.
So that's very helpful. Yep, so the patient should not see a bill if it is a sexual assault complaint. If there are any kind of injuries and you do need to have emergency services as well, scans and things like that, that is sometimes a cost to the patient. We don't bill through insurance like normal.
Okay, I'm just thankful that there isn't a barrier that stands between the survivor and wellness and being able to move a criminal investigation forward as well. So.
Right. And so if that is a detriment to them or, a barrier to be able to seek medical services for those types of things, they would be eligible for that Crime Victim Service Fund that is also available in the state of Wisconsin. So, and advocates are very versed to be able to assist with filling out those forms and applications.
Great. Well, the purpose wasn't to talk about SANE specifically, but I'm glad that we're able to provide some information to our community on exactly what that means. So anything else you want to add before we move to Jessica?
I think it's a good ball to pass to Jessica.
All right.
On the
Sounds
advocacy
good.
side.
Tell us about yourself, Jessica.
Sure. So I'm the program coordinator at the Women's Community for the Sexual Assault Victim Services Program, and I've been with the agency for 29 years. I oversee the program, and really my role is to provide support services to survivors who are accessing our services, whether that's through the SANE program or at the local police department, or maybe we connect with them when they're way down the line in the criminal justice system. So at any given point where a survivor of sexual assault wants to access our services, whether that's through the Child Advocacy Center or calling our 24-hour hotline, we are available to provide that emotional support. So everything is free, confidential, and we're really just available to meet people where they're at.
So meeting people where they're at, would that include maybe meeting survivors or victims at the hospital while a SANE is being completed?
Yes. So we have a protocol in our community through both of our SANE programs in which an advocate would be dispatched to the hospital, and then we would provide that emotional support and medical advocacy, safety planning, getting them connected to that crime victim compensation, getting them connected to that long-term support. So from that immediate crisis response until they no longer need us anymore. And so that's really such an important piece that they have that emotional support when they're going through the reporting process.
Great. Since I have you here, I know we're talking about sexual assault today, but broadly, does the women's community provide resources for other types of victimization as well?
Yes. So we are providing services to people of all genders, all ages, no matter what point they are at within their access, in seeking services. We are providing services to people impacted by domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, stalking, human trafficking, sexual harassment. So really trying to help people in any type of abusive situation, whether that's emotional, verbal, financial, elder abuse. So really the whole spectrum of what someone might be experiencing. And if we can't help them with something specifically, we have such a rich community of resources that we're able to connect them to those resources.
That's awesome. So glad to have you in our community.
Yeah, thank you.
For a long time, decades.
Yes.
So, all right. Last but not least,
I'm up.
Natalie.
Yes.
Tell me about yourself.
So I am an assistant district attorney with the Marathon County District Attorney's Office. And for those who don't know, we specialize in that office. So my specialty is in sensitive crimes, particularly sexual assault and domestic violence. Typically, that includes often victims who are women and children, but not always. In Marathon County at the courthouse, we have 6 judges, all of whom take criminal cases. So I'm assigned to a particular judge, and in that judge's courtroom, I cover those sensitive crimes and a variety of other general standard crimes.
All right. How many ADAs do we have?
I believe it is 13, including the district attorney.
Okay.
I believe that's correct. I'd have to go back and do the math.
No. That's all right. Just curious.
Yes. And I've been there for 7 years now.
7 years. All right. Well, thank you all for taking a moment to introduce yourselves. And before we talk about Seek Then Speak, I just want to talk about a few things about why this conversation matters. I think we would all agree, and feel free to chime in on this, that sexual assault is one of the most serious and prevalent crimes that not only our community faces, but communities across the nation face. And I know when looking at our statistics here that we receive and investigate about 6 complaints of sexual assault every single month. Now, that may or may not seem like a lot to our community, but that's a lot in my estimation. But what is more concerning is that when you look at certain studies, they will say that 2/3 of all sexual assaults go unreported. Why? Well, I think there are all sorts of reasons why that happens, but things like maybe fear, shame, maybe lack of trust in the criminal justice process or system itself. Maybe it's a lack of information. When you think about maybe why victims, survivors choose not to report, what might stick out to you? based upon your experiences?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, too, is it just might not be safe for them to report right now. And so that's why it's nice to hook them up with the resources where an advocate can work with them to be able to find that time that it might be. And that's one of the other things I wanted to mention, too, in thinking about it, is that in the state of Wisconsin, if they are undecided, they can still come for that SANE exam and get a forensic kit collected and send that off to the Wisconsin Crime Lab. And they will keep it on the shelf for up to 10 years or until that patient is ready to disclose to law enforcement. So that's a great benefit that we have.
It is, for sure. Anybody else have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think in my years of experience, a lot of victims have a lot of shame associated with what happened to them. And then I think just that natural fear of not feeling like they're going to be believed if they do tell. Or perhaps they were threatened. I think those are kind of the top three reasons that I hear a lot from victims and survivors, that they're just really fearful of telling someone else what happened. And so that can be a barrier to reporting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think in follow-up to that, it's probably nice to also point out that we all sit on the sexual assault response team here in Marathon County. So I don't know if we've talked about that team here before and its purpose, but part of it is prevention and information out to the community, especially in the legal side of obtaining convictions for sexual assault. One of the biggest barriers are myths, misconceptions, stereotypes that are prevalent in our society that sometimes make people feel that shame, make them feel that they can't come forward, make them feel they won't be believed. So part of what we do in addition to our independent jobs is we try to provide information to our community to break down those barriers and improve the eventual outcome, improve convictions, improve conditions so that people feel not only that they can come forward, but that they'll be heard, believed, and there will be successful prosecutions.
Yeah, I think the SART, or Sexual Assault Response Team, is really in line with all of our missions, but especially our mission here at the PD, where we partner with the community to enhance quality of life. We all have our own individual roles and responsibilities, and like a lot of things that can become siloed, but I think through relationship development and partnership over the years and the formation of that team, we're much better together at helping survivors, especially of sexual assault. So, all right. Well, Seek Then Speak is a program that provides a confidential and accessible way for survivors to learn about what their options are, and if they choose, to begin the process of reporting. So let's just address that question. What is Seek Then Speak? So really, two different things. Seek, then speak. So I'm going to look to you, Amy, first of all, if you're okay with it. Can you just explain what the Seek part of Seek Then Speak is?
So the Seek aspect of it is where the patient can go, the patient in my world, victims in yours, survivors in hers. So an individual can access this app. It's through AVAWI and Violence Against Women International put this together. So the Seek aspect is where they can find out information about what sexual assault is, how do I get help, what is advocacy, what is mandated reporting, how do I seek medical care, what would the reporting process look like, and kind of steps them through in a really trauma-informed way to be able to seek that information that they'll need.
So you mentioned AVAWI. I think that stands for End Violence Against Women International. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, which is not only a national, but maybe an international nonprofit. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so they have put together this program or this initiative to basically put the resources in the palm of survivors' hands, where it kind of walks them through not everything, but a lot of the things that they would want to know post-victimization to be able to begin hopefully healing from that victimization. Would you all agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. So really the Seek is information when they need it.
Right. So this happened to me. What do I do? And there's a kind of a dual aspect to the Seek where it can be, are you the person that this happened to? And there's kind of a set of questions and knowledge that it gives you as you progress through the app. Or are you a person seeking support for somebody else and then helping that person help the other person, if that makes sense.
Okay. So for accessibility, anyone could go and put in their browser seekthenspeak.app and be directed to really a simple web page where it talks about seek and then speak, and then they can go through whatever option that they want to go through. So that's the seek portion. How about the speak, Jessica?
Sure. So the speak portion of the app is really fabulous because it guides you to an investigative tool of a series of questions that the survivor can answer right on their either mobile phone, their laptop, their computer, a tablet. So it's really quite helpful in terms of guiding a survivor through a series of questions that are victim-centered, trauma-informed, put together by national experts in terms of questioning surrounding sexual assault. And what's great about Speak is that not everybody's ready to use their voice immediately. We know that survivors sometimes take a little bit of time to determine whether or not they want to make a law enforcement report. And so it allows them to document everything that happened to them as soon as they're ready. That could be when they see Amy, and they come in for a SANE exam and we talk with them about this as an option. They may be determining if they want to call law enforcement or not. So it's not meant to replace a traditional law enforcement interview, but it's an alternative option where survivors can access this app and they can fill it out. They can save it and come back. And maybe they need to take a break. Maybe they take a couple days and they come back and they can fill it out. And that's what's really great about the app is that it allows someone kind of their own time frame. Obviously, we want people to report as soon as possible, first and foremost, to seek that medical exam and make sure that, like Amy talked about, their well-being and their safety is okay. But if they decide that they want to make that report, they can start documenting it right away and come back to it, and then they can submit it when they're ready. And so it's a really nice alternative reporting tool.
Okay. Two things. Number one, Wausau is growing in its diversity. So what if English is not my, first language? How many languages, or are there opportunities for those that are not English native speakers to be able to use this app?
Yes. So another great tool about this app is that it allows over 100 different languages for someone to select their particular language. It will automatically go right into their language, and then they are able to print that out. So that is really helpful, especially if we don't have an interpreter ready and available. They can right away document everything that they need to, and then that can be submitted to the police department when they're ready.
Okay. And you talked about how the report can be saved. Now, you're putting in some very, very sensitive information into, some online thing. And how is any of that preserved online, or how does that work, just for confidentiality's sake?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, of course, that is very sensitive information. So it's really saved by the survivor. So it's saved. It can be saved as a PDF right on their own computer or on their phone, and they can print it out. They could work with a support person to fill it out, but they should always be the one filling it out. Someone else should not be filling it out for them. However, all of that information, you're going to be prompted to clear the information after you complete each question.
Okay.
So it will be saved on their own device, and then it can be printed out. It can be emailed in to a police department. It can be emailed to a friend, a support person, maybe a therapist. Maybe it's something that a therapist and the survivor talk through together. So really it can be utilized as a lot of different tools.
All right. So what I've heard is that, this app is really available anytime, anywhere, computer, tablet, mobile phone, whatever they want to use. They have multiple options to be able to save it locally on their cell phone or on their computer to be able to then go back into it and continue the app if they would like to. And it doesn't necessarily save their information up there in the cloud, and other people are able to then view it at some point in the future.
Right. Yep.
Good.
It's all free, confidential. So it's really up to the survivor to decide what they want to do with that information.
I actually have a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
I think for clarity too, the speak portion of it, and actually this whole application is built for adult survivors,
Yeah.
so 18 plus. And I think that the seek portion will be just as helpful in finding resources if this is someone who's utilizing it who's under 18. But the speak portion, those questions are intended for adults who have the ability to consent or not to sex. So that does make a difference in that speak portion. So it's just not made for people under 18, that speak portion. Seek, I think, just as helpful, but really to clarify that so that, teens who may have access to this aren't necessarily going to get questions that are going to be as helpful because the law is just different.
Yeah, and I think that's a good lead-in to really the next section, and that is just the role of Seek, then Speak in law enforcement and in advocacy. I assume at some point, Natalie, that you have gone through the list of questions that might be in that Speak portion.
I did do that,
Yeah,
yes.
so tell me more about that and what you observed and took away from that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this tool. I think there are a ton of benefits to it, hand in hand. So primarily, right, we were talking about what are these barriers to why people report. And I think there's a lot of intimidation from civilians, from people who don't interact with our systems that often, to even just come to a police department. That's kind of a foreign idea for those of us who don't do it every day. So it's at their leisure, at a place where they feel most comfortable and safe. And I would note law enforcement will go to you too. So that doesn't have to be a barrier. They'll definitely go to you. But the question sets are really easy to understand for the reader. They're very clear in what's being asked. They're non-judgmental. They're legally sound. And they ask for a lot of information that ultimately, if someone was immediately on scene, I think with an officer, the officer would ask. So it allows an opportunity for that survivor to capture their memory and the information we might ultimately need to move forward if they wanted to with a prosecution. Not to replace a law enforcement investigation, but definitely to enhance it, to do that work up front and be able to then look back on it and have it captured as soon and as immediately as possible. Really beneficial for them, really beneficial for us, so that we don't have to repeat information or go backwards, or we can extrapolate on something. I see how this question was answered, and I know as an officer why I'm going to need more follow-up on that, or why we should go look now for this piece of evidence.
Right.
And a lot of that's based on how the question is asked. And I think they're very thorough and really well thought out.
So it's going to ask many of the same questions that they would be asked by a law enforcement officer or detective or a special assignment officer, but it allows them to provide that information at their own pace. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think at your own pace, where you feel comfortable doing it, which may be 3 a.m. under your covers,
Sure.
And obviously there's room too for, I don't understand that question, or I'm not sure. Not everyone has all of the answers. But it's a good placeholder to know what types of questions you'll be asked too when you're thinking about reporting. This isn't that scary. I can answer this. This is okay. I think it gives some confidence in survivors to feel like I have some ownership now over what happened to me. I feel like I can explain it and put it into words. And I think when you give some of that power back to people, they feel more empowered to come forward and really become part of the system.
Okay. Well, on the side of medical and advocacy services, how do you see Seek Then Speak helping you in the jobs that you perform?
Yeah, so for medical, like Jess had alluded before, if they're kind of on the fence of reporting or not reporting, we can give them this opportunity to take a look at the questions so that you would kind of get an idea of what they might ask you and just have an idea of what to expect. And I think that can really reduce that anxiety for them. So I think that's primarily how we would use it in the medical aspect, to just kind of give them that preview of what to expect.
I think it's clear, Amy, but you don't work for law enforcement, right? You're a completely separate entity.
Yeah.
And people can elect to come to you and do a full exam and collect all that evidence and still say, I'm not ready to go to law enforcement,
Yes.
right? But you preserve it and you collect it for them, and it's their choice then.
Yeah, exactly.
Because timeliness is important, right? There are certain things that will be lost if not tended to pretty quickly. Can you just explain kind of the timeline?
Yeah, so we can collect forensic evidence during our medical forensic visits up to 5 days, so 120 hours or 5 days.
Okay.
And also some STI prophylaxis and emergency contraception is also within that 120-hour time frame as well. So it is important for them to come in as soon as possible. But we understand that it is, hard to come to that conclusion that, yes, this actually has happened to me and I need to seek medical attention. But I think if you have that awareness and know what to expect, that you'll be more comfortable to come in sooner.
How about as an advocate?
Yeah. So I think in advocacy, it'll be really helpful for us to explain that this is an option. It's not uncommon that we get phone calls on our 24-hour hotline from people who are questioning, something happened to me, but I'm not sure if I want to make a report, or something happened to me years ago. Can I still make a report? We do get a lot of questions about that. So I think also for delayed reporters, it will be a nice option that it's not something that's really emergent in terms of seeking medical attention, but it would be an option that maybe they could document everything that they remember, and then again, when they're ready, they could make that decision to submit that report. So I think it'll be a really nice option for people who are immediately determining if they should make a report, or even from long ago, in terms of delayed reporting. And then in the hospital setting, when we're responding out to the hospital, I think it's also just a really nice tool, because we have a lot of survivors who are really debating of whether or not they should make a report. And so it's something that they can then be introduced to, and we can do some follow-up with them. We always do follow-up with survivors after they've been to the hospital within, the first couple of days of after leaving the hospital, just to check in on how people are doing. And so at that time, we could say, have you given any more thought about making a police report? Have you given any more thought about Seek Then Speak? That could be an option for you to document everything in the meantime while it's fresh in your memory, and then come back to it. So I really think it's going to be a nice reporting alternative tool if they're not ready to maybe be in person with an officer.
Okay. You mentioned delayed reporting.
Yes.
I imagine that some watching or listening to this today might look at a program like this as condoning or encouraging delayed reporting. Do you think that is what this program is about?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think that what we want is the program really is supporting survivors' choices. And I agree with what Natalie had to say. It's empowering victims to be in the driver's seat, right? So I think that we want to give that power back to survivors to say, this is something that happened to me. Only I can decide if I'm ready to move forward with telling others. And so just like they have the right to decline, an advocate or a law enforcement report, they have the right to decide, if and when they're ready to make that report. And so we don't want to discourage people from seeking help. We, Amy talked a lot about the seek portion. We want people to seek out resources and seek help. That is vital in terms of healing from sexual assault. We want people to seek out that information, and then we want them to explore their options surrounding reporting. And I think that the app really gives so many rich resources, and then really walks you through what it would be like to maybe talk to an officer. And so it feels a little less scary, I feel like, especially for people who are just not sure they want to tell their their story of what happened. But we definitely want people to come forward as soon as possible. But we know that sexual assault is one of the most underreported crimes in terms of all the crimes that happen. And so it's such an intimate decision in terms of whether or not you want to share this details with someone. And so having that time to think about it and then submit when you're ready is really what I think Seek Then Speak is all about.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think this is gap filling. I don't think it's creating, or enhancing what's already there, which is it's incredibly common for people to wait to decide to report these types of crimes. As you pointed out earlier, just because most often, historically, the people who hurt us are people we know.
Yes.
And it is a big decision-making step to say, this person hurt me in a way I didn't expect, and now I have to go through a process to move forward with that. So I think I couldn't tell you even how many cases I've worked on in my time at the DA's office, but I can certainly tell you less than a handful of them are immediate on-scene reports. So I don't think it's that this is encouraging that. I think that already happens. I think this application is gap filling for those people who are waiting and aren't sure what to do, and it's providing a resource, and it's helping potentially collect evidence, which is good for everybody.
Yeah, what I hear is that it's delayed reporting is a reality, and Seek Then Speak actually has the potential to minimize some of the delays. Like if I go and seek information and I learn, I need a SANE, well, they're empowered to then follow up and get that SANE completed. Even if they're not willing at that point to engage law enforcement, there's no obligation for them to do so. And like you talked about, that kit is preserved for at least 10 years. Is that accurate?
10 years. Well, we tell them 9.5. It does take some time to process the DNA.
But gives them some additional time. And then with the speak portion, even if they don't save it and hand it off to a law enforcement agency, they're beginning to document the things that are going to be essential to prosecution, which might be a part of that recipe that brings wellness, back.
Yeah. And unfortunately for many people, it's an ongoing event. So maybe, we're starting to document over time until we're ready to finally come forward whenever the last time is producing that.
Yeah, we recognize that survivors, they process trauma in all sorts of different ways, and this is really a survivor victim-centered approach to be able to meet them where they're at while not losing out on those things that we might need going forward, which we talk about, the ability to capture DNA, or, in the questions there are things that we look for corroboration. It might be surveillance video, and surveillance video, for example, gets overwritten quite often. And so we just want to throw out there that there are, unfortunately, some things that just go away as far as an evidence side of things when we delay report. But Seek Then Speak, I think, brings out some of those considerations that our victims can think about as they're weighing, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Am I going to report this or not report this, or just when the timing is right for them?
I really like the questions that they have in there too, just surrounding consent, coercion. I think those questions also just help educate survivors in terms of I didn't give consent, or I was coerced or forced into doing something I didn't want to do. And so I really think the victim-centered questions are just also a healing tool. So even just reading those questions and really thinking about those answers, I think really will help survivors in healing and starting that healing process as well.
Absolutely. Well, we've talked about a lot so far. Hopefully we've given our community a decent picture of what Seek Then Speak can potentially do for survivors of sexual assault. What else can our community do to help survivors, would you say?
I think that the community really can step up and help support survivors in terms of when someone comes to you and says that this has happened, whether you're a loved one of someone that this has happened to, or you're a professional or maybe you're their guidance counselor or their teacher. I think that it's important to start by believing and really let them know that, thank you so much for telling me that, and I believe that this happened to you, and how can I help? And so I think it's important that everyone plays a part in responding to sexual assault in our community. As you noted earlier, the number of sexual assaults you're receiving here at the police department every week. We know that this is happening in the community, and so we don't want to be silent about it. We really want the community to support survivors. And maybe support looks like, I believe you, I'm sorry this happened to you. Or maybe it looks like, let's call someone together and get some resources for you. Or, there's this app now that they can learn about. Let's take a look at this app together. And so I think that, just a small step in supporting is the first step.
I think the last thing that we want for a survivor is for them to be left alone, or even if they have people around them, to feel as though they're alone and isolated. And I think I heard it said at one point in time that, healing happens in relationship. And I think it's important for our community, and especially survivors of sexual assault, to know that there are people like us and there are loved ones within their own circles who are willing to help them out. And I think, first of all, information, which Seek Then Speak provides, is a good option for them to start with. So.
Yeah. And I think, Natalie talked about our sexual assault response team, and, doing this work all these years, I feel very privileged to work with all of the experts in the community, that we have excellence in our SANE programs and our prosecutors and law enforcement, that survivors need to know that we have ready and willing and expertise of a team of people who are going to support them. Whether they choose to report or not, we are all waiting and ready. And so I think that's just a really beautiful thing about our services and our collaboration in Marathon County. And so I'm really proud of all of the work that we've accomplished together to try to help survivors start that healing process.
That's great. We're all obviously here to help, but we have teams behind us. And there are certainly other organizations out there within our community that provide like-minded service as well. So we're definitely here to help.
Yeah, and when I think about the community too, what can the community do to help? I think about it as a prosecutor from the perspective that my community is also my jury pool. So, become educated in these topics. They're hard topics. They're uncomfortable. We don't think about them on a day-to-day basis. We even avoid them. But by opening yourself up to learning more about them, to supporting people who come to you, to being willing to advocate when you hear things that just aren't true, or that are myths, or that are misconceptions about these types of offenses, those are things that you then ultimately take into a courtroom when you're asked to sit in judgment and decide if these crimes happened. So our community is vital in prevention, and also our community is vital in making sure that people who do this are held accountable. So they're almost more important than we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we draw this podcast to a close, I hope that we can just go around, and I'll begin with you, Amy. Just what is a key takeaway from Seek Then Speak from the medical perspective?
A key takeaway is to be able to educate yourself, to know that there are medical resources available. And I think that the app will be able to guide them to be able to seek that medical care that they need to ensure that, just that reassurance that their bodies are still healthy. And I think that's just really good reassurance.
Absolutely. How about you, Jessica?
Sure. I think a key takeaway about Seek Then Speak is that it's really a useful and beautiful tool, an alternative tool that's going to empower survivors to use their voice when they're ready in that safe space, maybe in their own home or at an advocacy agency, or maybe they started at the SANE program. And I think it's very trauma-informed. So I really like that survivors can access it, whether they're a person with a disability or a person who's using another language. It's really going to be a useful tool for people to remove those barriers surrounding reporting.
Great. How about you, Natalie?
I would say from the prosecution perspective that our look at this is that it has value inherently. It's something that we will potentially utilize and that has credibility to it. So for whatever reason you use it, ultimately, if it does become part of a criminal justice prosecution, it's something we'll take seriously. So don't ever feel like you can't utilize it. We know about it and certainly support it.
Yeah, I can imagine that if a survivor brings in the speak portion and hands that to a patrol officer on their initial report with an advocate next to them, they're going to celebrate that survivor for, first of all, having the bravery to walk through that process. But it certainly is very helpful from the officer's perspective in forwarding that investigation and moving that investigation forward. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it has the potential to be a great impact and help to all of us and hopefully to them. So just in recap, how do you access Seek Then Speak for our community? Well, you can visit seekthenSpeak.app to learn more about this initiative. And you can also contact your local law enforcement, the women's community, Aspirus, the DA's office. We will have information on that as well. So I just want to reinforce for our viewers or listeners that Seek Then Speak is not a substitute for reporting, but it is a tool that empowers survivors. You mentioned that multiple times, Jessica. It provides information when they need it and a way to report when they're ready. And we know that that is different for every single person. So I just encourage the Wausau community to spread awareness about Seek Then Speak to ensure survivors know that they have support. So thank you so much for listening, and we hope that this podcast has been informative to you.